Mr. Terry, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, we're back with History Matters, the best history YouTube channel on there with short videos. They usually run less than 5 minutes. And today's video is an awesome question that I like talking about in my classes, and one that should be talked about if you don't really understand the specifics. And that is, why didn't America join the League of Nations? Right? The League of Nations was the United Nations before the United Nations existed. Something proposed after World War I. Some of that credit goes to American President Woodrow Wilson, who proposed it. But interestingly, the United States never joined it. So I'm interested to learn what they say about it. I'm going to add what I know about this as well. And again, I think it's a very important thing because, as you know, the United States becomes a major player in the UN, the United Nations, which was created right after World War II. All right, the original video link is down below. Make sure you're supporting History Matters. And if you like what we're doing here, hit that sub button. Hope to have you around the community. And with that, let's get started.
The League of Nations, created after World War I to provide an international forum to resolve disputes and to deter future wars.
That worked. It was an organization to prevent wars from ever existing again. Yeah, no.
It famously did none of those things.
Yeah.
Perhaps more famous, though, is the fact that the United States, despite its leadership being the most outspoken proponents for the League, didn't join. Which raises the pretty obvious question. Why not? Why did the United States refuse to join the League of Nations?
Can I add a question to this, too? It's going to be a very American-centric question, but I think it bears asking. Do you think the if the United States had joined the League of Nations, that it would have had a bigger role potentially in settling disputes that led up to World War I? Would it have helped with enforcing things? Or is that too American-centric of a point of view? Now, keeping in mind the United States did assume a much bigger role in global economics and politics after World War I. What do you think? Let me know down below.
So, like most peculiarities in American history, this one can be traced back to Congress. During the First World War, President Wilson had presented his 14-point plan for the post-war world. This included principles like the right to self-determination, armament reduction, and of course the creation of a League of Nations to arbitrate any future issues to make sure that conflict on that scale never happened again. Now,
I'm not going to go through, I don't know if they're even going to go through the whole 14 points. Probably isn't the forum to do that. But there are a lot of things that in America, in Wilson's 14 points that do go there. Although maybe not as fully as one might expect. Like the self-determination thing, the idea that places, especially colonies, that would like to form their own governments and get independent should be allowed to do such a thing. Because when you look at some of the original conflicts of World War I, most specifically something like Bosnia, a place that had a lot of nationalist aspirations, but didn't achieve those because it was a colony or colonized, was annexed by Austria-Hungary. And then, but we do see after the war, a lot of self-determination does happen, mostly in Europe. Where it didn't apply, and people found very hypocritical, was in non-European colonies, okay? And definitely didn't happen among colonies of nations that won the war. The decolonization and the self-determination happened in places that suffered in the war, like Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Russia, right? But other places, say like Vietnam or India, places that fought for allies and fought a role as the Indians fought for the British, and then places like Vietnam was part of French Indochina, so it was a colony of France, did not get their independence, which provided a lot of protests leading up to conflicts leading forward.
And Wilson was extremely proud of these ideas, and he was confident that the Democratic-controlled Congress would pass this, and they just lost the midterms. And so, by the time the Versailles peace negotiations were ongoing, Wilson had to deal with a hostile Congress, which wasn't going to pass anything without any serious modifications.
Let's remember this. We have basically policy here in the United States that does not want to get involved in European politics, Monroe Doctrine. And the United States didn't join the war, you remember, early on. I mean, they joined it in 1917, basically the final year of the war. They watched the war for like 3 years because there wasn't really a good reason to, from the American perspective. And also, just there's a general opinion that Americans don't want to get involved in those kind of conflicts. I want to focus more on Western Hemisphere politics, which is what American foreign policy was largely at that time. So after World War I, people definitely did not want to get involved in foreign politics again. And you'll see, I'm sure you'll see a little more here. I'll let the video go on a little bit about what specifically Congress was concerned about by joining the League of Nations.
Thus, led by Senator Henry Lodge, the Republicans asked for some modifications to the Charter of the League of Nations before they'd agree to join. The primary issue was that members of the League were required to use military force against aggressive military states if the League demanded it, which
the problem is that never happens. The League of Nations, which again, this is where I was talking about that question of could the League of Nations have had more of an enforcing power if the United States had joined it? Because they didn't enforce anything, right? So many rules were broken over time, and some of the ones leading up, say Italy's invasion of Ethiopia or something like that, where basically nothing happened. There was no military intervention at all, and when you can't enforce policies, then what good are the policies?
Lodge and his peers saw as an infringement on American autonomy. Wilson believed that everything that had been negotiated during the Versailles Conference was fine as it was, and so refused to change anything. In fact, joining the League was bundled in with peace with Germany, meaning that America couldn't formally be at peace unless Congress agreed to both at once. Wilson tried to get around this deadlock not by changing his mind, that would be silly, but by travelling around the country and drumming up support. Yeah. The idea was that the League would resonate with Americans, who would in turn pester their representatives until they agreed with Wilson.
Now, interestingly, Wilson, again, went all around the country trying to promote the idea of joining the League of Nations to citizens. And it was very taxing on his already weak health, and he ends up dying.
This didn't work, and Wilson never got anywhere with passing the treaty. Wilson was succeeded as president by Warren G. Harding, who at first wanted to join the League, providing it couldn't force America into war. But as time went on, support for the League dwindled, and so Harding signed a separate peace treaty with Germany and pushed for independent agreements to make the world safer. The most notable of these agreements was the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited the size of the great powers' navies.
That was supposed to be a thing that happened with all countries. Reduction of armaments, and the criticism early in the Treaty of Versailles was that was forced upon Germany, far more restrictive than other countries. Like Germany could only have an army of about 100,000, basically no air force and pretty much no navy and tanks and all that stuff. But those rules didn't apply to the Allied nations, so it was very unequal. That's a different story, talking about what goes into the treaty, but you can see some of the disdain that the Germans, of course, will have based on the enforcing of these things by the League of Nations. So hopefully you're already seeing, and you might be seeing here, the reasons why Germany felt, and political groups like, say, the Nazi Party, come in and want to pretty much destroy the things that the League of Nations has created that way. But again, if you brush past it there, the biggest reason why the United States did not join the war, or join the League of Nations, was American politicians feared that the right to declare war would be taken away from them, which is a major constitutional right for Congress, is to declare war. And they're afraid that being a part of an international organization would bypass that, thus taking away power from the American Congress and then having that power given to a foreign body.
In August 1923, Harding left his position as US President to focus on his new passion of being dead, and his Vice President Calvin Coolidge took over. Coolidge was a fierce proponent of kicking the League of Nations can down the road, and he largely tried to keep America distant from European affairs. And after this, the issue had very little importance to the American people, and even less so when Great Depression.
Yes,
the League proved itself to be powerless in the face of Japanese, Italian, and German aggression, which meant that American leadership had no interest in joining such a weak organization.
Correct.
And by the time World War II had rolled around, Americans had forgotten all about it.
So you're hearing here that as time went on after World War I, there were not increasing reasons why the United States should join that. Even if you see these aggressive actions, maybe it has the opposite effect, because it's like you see these aggressive actions by, they say, the future Axis powers here. And maybe those actions made Americans even further not want to get involved, because they didn't think that any of those things, like Japan invading China in the early 30s, or again, Italy invading Ethiopia or something like that, where they're thinking, man, if we were in the League of Nations, we'd probably have to join up and fight this, even though League of Nations doesn't do anything in those things other than write strongly worded letters of disdain for the actions, but didn't enforce anything. But maybe those things led Americans even further to thinking, no, we're staying out of this kind of stuff.
Although after the war, America would go on to join the League's successor, the United Nations.
For sure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching, with a special thanks to my patrons, James Bisonet, Kelly...
Go patrons. All right, let's get the breakdown. All right, great little mini breakdown. I mean, there's only really a couple real points you have to discuss about why the United States didn't join the League of Nations, and they hit hard the one that was just the most accurate, which is Congress specifically, as a reflection of American society, but much amongst them, but as well as the reflection of American society, did not want to get involved in future European conflicts. That's just how it was. So it did that. But again, I want you to give me your thoughts down below if you stayed with me here. And I'll put this as the pinned comment, so look for that. But do you think the League of Nations could have had more success in preventing World War II if the United States had joined it? Honestly, I want to hear your opinion about that. Is that more of a Eurocentric thing? Is there some truth to it? I don't know. Love to hear your feedback on that. All right, again, the video link is down below. Go ahead and check out the description down below too. You're going to see some other fun links to things. Our Discord server, my gaming channel, fun history merch, all kinds of great things down there if you are a history buff. All right, with that, we'll see you next time.